G'day everyone and welcome back to this Hidden Gems ShareCafe webinar. Now this week we are exclusively discussing the medicinal cannabis market, a market that is forecasted to be worth $46 billion, that's US dollars in 2026, so not far away. And that's despite the fact the FDA has approved very few products in this space. So while demand is increasing, it still seems to be a heavily regulated market, legalised in some countries and in its infancies in others. So while medicinal cannabis has a range of applications, like in cancer therapy, getting it to the people who need it appears to be regulated in different ways in different countries. Now, that appears to be the industry's biggest challenge, getting approved products into the hands of people who desperately need it. So first up, to discuss this topic, we have an industry expert from Fresh Leaf Analytics. We have with us Cassandra Hunt, who is the Managing Director. Now, if you don't know anything about the company is the leading source of information about the medicinal cannabis industry in Australia. Cassandra, thanks for your time. Over to you.
Thanks, Tim. So as Tim mentioned, I'm the Managing Director of Fresh Leaf Analytics. Our work in the industry encompasses detailed market intelligence reports, custom research, market analysis, and of course, strategy development for the medicinal cannabis industry. We work with medicinal cannabis companies, pharmaceutical and consumer goods organisations, government, and we also work with companies who are looking to assess investment opportunities in the market. Moving on to the next slide, twice a year, Fresh Leaf Analytics releases a free industry report on the state of the medicinal cannabis industry in Australia. And today I'm going to share with you some of the key highlights from our most recent report, which is our first half report for 2021. It contains data on patient, product and pricing in the industry, and that data is derived from proprietary Fresh Leaf models, data from the Therapeutic Goods Administration, from product companies, and also from an anonymised real-world patient data. For those of you who are wanting to read the report in detail, it is available on our website, which is freshleafanalytics.com.au. So we'll get into it. I'm pleased to say that the medicinal cannabis industry continues to experience very robust market growth. Product revenue in 2020 closed at just over 100 million, and that was up from 30 million in the previous year. So really significant growth year on year. We closed 2020 with around 30,000 active patients. And so they're patients who have filled a prescription or seen a doctor for medicinal cannabis in the past month. Now, this is a significant jump up from 2019, where the year ended with 10,000 active patients. Now, turning our focus to 2021, there are currently around 55,000 active patients in the market, and we're estimating that we'll finish the year at between 75 to 85,000 active patients. Now, it's worth noting that at the start of 2019, there were just 3,000 active patients. So we've seen a growth factor of over 15 times in just 2 years. In terms of product revenue, we are expecting that 2021 will bring a milestone for us and that we'll see over 200 million in product revenue by the end of this year. And in fact, year-to-date sales have already well surpassed the total year sales for 2019. Now, in terms of indicators of market growth, for those of you who aren't familiar with the industry, moving on to the next slide, the two key indicators to keep an eye on are what we call SASB and Authorized Prescriber. And both of these indicators have hit record numbers in 2021. Now, SASB represents the number of per patient approvals for prescriptions in Australia, while Authorized Prescriber represents the number of doctors who have authorization to prescribe medicinal cannabis products without needing to get a per patient approval. So we've seen, starting with SASB, we've seen some volatility in the SASB numbers this year, and we've seen two very big spikes, one in March and one in May. And both of those months we hit almost 10,000 approvals. To put that number into context for you, the previous 12-month average was 5,000 approvals per month. So they were really significant spikes. Now, there's a couple of factors that are driving the volatility that you can see in the graph that's on the left-hand side of the page. Some of these are signalling what we believe is genuine underlying market growth, while there are some others that have artificially raised approvals. So for example, there was a flower shortage that the industry experienced earlier this year, which required doctors to submit a number of approvals for a single patient or a single prescription. And so industry observers are going to be watching that SASB number very, very closely over the next couple of months to see where it settles and to see what it tells us about the true growth trajectory of the industry. Now, looking at the number of authorised prescribers, this is a really fascinating and significant story. You can see that the number of authorised prescribers was low and stagnant for quite a long period of time, but recently this has started to gain momentum. So we hit 263 authorised prescribers in May. That's up from 179 in December, and just 29 authorised prescribers in the year prior to that, so December 2019. And the reason that it's a really important metric for the industry is because authorised prescribers typically prescribe in very high volumes. And in fact, we estimate that they now prescribe medicinal cannabis for around 1 in 5 patients. So while the SASB or special access pathway remains a primary channel for patients who are seeking access to medicinal cannabis, the authorised prescriber pathway is going to be a significant contributor for future growth and future patient numbers. Now, moving on to the next slide, this slide shows the number of products that are available in Australia for doctors to choose from to prescribe for patients. And Australia has become a highly commoditised market. There are now around 190 products on the market for doctors to choose from, and the products keep coming. So what you'll see from the graph here is that the number of products available has roughly doubled each year since 2018. It's really difficult to think of an industry that has so many companies that are vying for a piece of what is still a relatively small, although be it fast-growing pie. In terms of product formats, the growth has primarily come from oil, although we did see some modest growth from the number of flower products, obviously prior to the flower shortage. Together, oil and flower comprise over 80% of the products that are available, and so they very much still do dominate the industry. They're traditional formats that dominate the industry still today. Now, while the number of products available is fantastic for doctor and patient choice, it also comes with great challenges. Because the industry is highly commoditised, it's difficult for physicians to differentiate between products beyond price and formulation. And so meaningful differentiation in the product space, but also in customer experience more broadly, remains an issue for the industry. As you can imagine, moving on to the next slide, you can see that in an environment of intense competition and record product numbers, the price is continuing to drop. And we've seen steady price declines over the last couple of years. 2021 has brought a substantial drop in the retail floor price, so the cheapest product on the market from a retail price perspective, and it's now 3 cents per milligram of cannabinoid. Now, this is half of what the floor price was towards the end of 2020, where it was 6 cents per milligram. So we can see that the price is dropping very quickly. I do want to point out, though, that just because there are cheaper products available on the market, it doesn't mean that patients are being prescribed those products or that those products are yet widely available. And at the moment, only around 1 in 5 products on the market has a retail floor price that sits below that 10 cents per milligram mark. And we have freshly anecdotally heard reports that there are a number of low price products in the market that are failing to gain traction. And the same thing is happening with delivery format innovation, where new delivery formats have not yet reached critical mass. So simply put, just putting a cheap product in the market or a new delivery format in the market is not a guarantee for success. And there's a variety of reasons for this. So doctors may be concerned about quality of the products or about efficacy. Many doctors do stick with their tried and tested, particularly with new delivery formats, where they often ask for they have a higher asking price. So doctors, if they're not familiar with them, feel that that might be a bit more of a risk particularly in an industry where patients are, paying quite a lot of money for the medication. Organisations, company players or industry players might have budgets that restrict things like doctor education and engagement. So as you can imagine, doctors are busy people. Having to stay abreast of 190 different products and keep track of what's coming into the market is no easy task for them. And outside of that, we might see with delivery formats that they don't allow the kind of flexibility that doctors are used to having with products like oil. So all of this contributes to patients feeling that the products in the market are still too expensive, and we do expect that we'll see the average price of products continue to drop, as well as that floor price in the future. Now on to patient spend. So patients at the moment are spending on average $359 a month. And you can see here that patient spend has remained relatively flat over the past 3 years. In terms of the average daily dose, patients are taking about 87 milligrams a day of their medication, and over 3/4 of patients are actually on a dose that's less than 100 milligrams a day. And moving on to the next slide, this is an important statistic to take note of in terms of where the market is at the moment. And the reason for that is that the TGA downscheduled low-dose CBD from Schedule 4, where it's prescription only, to Schedule 3, where you can go into a pharmacy, talk to the pharmacist and get a low-dose CBD product over the counter. Although I will point out that there are no products yet on the market. Companies have plans underway for doing the clinical research that's required to demonstrate quality, safety and efficacy, and to get those applications into the TGA for registration on the ARTG. Now, almost 1/4 of medicinal cannabis patients are currently taking a low-dose CBD product. They're spending about $8 a day. And we're expecting that that patient cohort will migrate to the pharmacy channel once low-dose CBD products become available. So that's over sort of 10,000 patients who are currently spending about $30 million a year. And so our belief is that the companies who are able to be the first to get to the S3 market will be the ones that take the lion's share of that group. Because people will naturally be reluctant to go to a doctor and get a prescription for a product that they can easily access over the counter in pharmacies. And interestingly, within the industry, we have begun to see a sort of evidence of shuffling in low-dose CBD products as the market readies itself. And that's taken the form of companies entering the industry, as well as products and manufacturers choosing to exit the industry. And the reasons for that could be that they have products at the moment that sit in that S3 profile but aren't suitable for S3. They might not have the right delivery format, for example. They might not meet the manufacturing requirements for registering a product. And so companies may be choosing not to invest in further clinical research required to demonstrate the sort of efficacy of these products, where there's concerns about whether the maximum daily dose of 150 milligrams a day will in fact be effective. So we'll expect to see that some of these companies will shift their focus elsewhere and may introduce either more suitable S3 Schedule 3 formulations or move away from low-dose CBD altogether. And to wrap up, in terms of what we see lies ahead for the industry, we are expecting further industry consolidation as a result of price decreases and companies whose business models may not have built those price decreases into consideration when they set their operations up a few years ago. We're expecting changes in the regulatory landscape as well as the product and pricing landscape. And I can see that my time is up, Tim, so I'm going to wind it up there and leave it for questions later.
Thanks, Sandra. We do have some questions. In terms of being an authorised prescriber, what does a doctor have to be an authorised prescriber if they're prescribing authorised products? I mean, it seems to be an additional layer of regulatory overkill, if you like.
So the authorised prescriber channel was set up for doctors who want to do or are doing high volumes of prescriptions. At the moment, the products are unregistered, and so the SASB system was put in place for the individual patient approvals, which means that TGA can keep a pretty close eye on what products are getting approved for which type of patients and for what sort of indications. So really that will remain a primary pathway until we get to a point where there's more GPs or more specialists who are prescribing high volumes.
And there's a question here, how are prescribers determining the dosage of cannabis products needed?
So that will come down to their clinical assessment and the patient's condition and what they believe is required. Typically, doctors use what's called a start low, go slow. And so they'll go for a lower dosage and then titrate up depending on how a patient is responding to their medication.
And what are they prescribing products for? Is it for sleep apnea and all those sort of things?
So primarily for pain, we see certainly a lot of patients coming through for different types of pain. Patients are also looking at stress and anxiety. Of course, there's epilepsy, rare forms of childhood epilepsy. Epidiolex is a product that has been registered on the ARTG and is approved for that. We have Sativex, which is also registered, which is for multiple sclerosis. So they're the sorts of indications that we're seeing patients prescribed medicinal cannabis for.
And where is Australia in this kind of global landscape? Where are we positioned in terms of our development in this space?
So Australia is quite a unique market in that we've taken a pharmaceutical approach to medicinal cannabis. We are highly regulated. We are very focused on getting quality and products to patients that will be effective. We are different to places like Canada and the US, for example, where you might be able to, sort of access CBD products much more readily. But I believe we've taken a much more sort of medically and more patient sort of centered approach and more responsible approach in Australia than elsewhere.
And where's Big Pharma positioned in this? Obviously, we've got some companies presenting in a moment. Is this a space Big Pharma are entering into globally?
So we haven't seen a lot of overt evidence yet of Big Pharma, although we are seeing some movements in the market. So you may have heard about the recent acquisition of GW Pharma by Jazz Pharmaceuticals. That was for $7.2 billion. GW Pharma are the companies that registered and manufacture Epidiolex and Sativex. And so with that sort of transaction and also obviously the market potential, we are expecting that Big Pharma will come on board in the future, but not in such a big way just yet.
Great. Thanks, Cassandra. That's all we have time for. We'd love to share some of your content on ShareCafe just to help educate readers and investors alike.
Great. Thanks, Tim. My pleasure.
Thank you. Next up, we have Little Green Pharma. We welcome back Little Green Pharma, ASX code LGP, market cap of around $123 million and a one-year return of up 74%. I think when Fleeta was first on our webinar some time back, it was a 20-cent share price and it's now 60 cents. So congratulations, Fleeta. The company is a leading Australian medicinal cannabis company, first with Australia's first locally produced product available now for approved patients. We welcome back Fleeta. Thanks for your time, Fleeta.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me today. Yes, my name is Fleeta. I'm the Managing Director of Little Green Pharma. And Little Green Pharma is all about transforming the lives of patients across the world. If we go to the corporate overview slide, I just want to talk to the shareholding a little bit. I would want to mention that Angus Caithness and myself, we're both executive directors of the company and we own about 14% of the company between us. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is that so investors and shareholders can be really comfortable that we think like investors, we think like you. We're not just management, so we want the best of both worlds, the best for the patient, and we want the best for our investors. The company has no debt. We have cash reserves of 28.5 million as of March end, and the market cap is around the 120 mark at the moment. The business is continuing to grow. Onto our vision. LGP's vision is to do extraordinary things for our patients and to solve real patient problems. And this is our belief, it's our purpose, and it continues to be our strategy. And it's really entrenched within our organisation, and that's really important for what we deliver. Okay, moving on. So who are we? So we are Little Green Pharma, and we produce pharmaceutical-grade cannabis medicines to treat a wide variety of medical conditions. So we're strictly medicinal. We operate a vertically integrated business model. So this means we operate across the entire supply chain. So we cultivate our own cannabis plants, and we also manufacture them into final medicines. And we believe this is really advantageous because, particularly in a new and emerging industry, because we can see where the opportunities lie and where value can be created in each of these activities. So we think that's a huge benefit. We were Australia's first producer of cannabis medicines back in August 2018 and the first to export overseas, and we've now got patients across the globe benefiting from our medicines. I'm just going to go to the next slide and show you our cultivation facility. So as you can see, it's almost a hospital grade, although the nature is very hospital driven in that it's so sterile, it's very clean. And this has the capacity to produce about 3 tonnes of raw biomass every year or 300,000 bottles of cannabis medicines. If we go and look at the manufacturing facility, this is GMP licensed by the TGA. And GMP is good manufacturing practice, and it's really essential license for us to have because we need to export to certain markets such as Germany, France, Poland, because it's EU recognised in Australia. So not many companies across the globe have this capability, so it's definitely a huge advantage. Okay, we have a very clear growth strategy to achieve our vision, and this is how we're going to grow. First of all, patient acquisition in Australia. So sales in Australia demonstrates market validity, particularly for those emerging markets overseas that we're targeting. And secondly, it generates immediate cash flow to support the development of our international pathways. The second point here, and the most important, is commercial sales volumes in overseas markets, because this is where we aim to make the profits in future. We continue to expand our distribution and sales network in these markets, and this is the type of announcement that you need to look out for from us, because to us, this is the real prize. Now, number 3, our end game, and the reason why we exist is innovative drug delivery technology. And this is what's going to solve real patient problems in the future. So the technology that we're working on at the moment aims to generate micron-sized particles of active ingredients. And this is intended to facilitate improved bioavailability into the human body. And we're looking forward to doing human trials soon. If we have a look at our track record of patient access, in total, we've sold more than 60,000 units of cannabis medicine now. Last quarter, we generated 2.46 million in revenue and finished the quarter with 28.5 million cash at bank. We estimate we have about 12,000 patients in Australia, and we think this is about 20% market share of the country. And it's the capturing of market share to us that is so important because of brand equity. We attribute some of this to our first mover advantage and our brand recognition, but also to our unique model of engaging physicians and making patient access easier across the country. And I'm going to demonstrate how. So in Australia, if we go to the next slide, we've entered in, there are a couple of things that we've done. One of them is we entered into a strategic partnership with the Health Insurance Fund of Australia. Now, what is so significant about this is that HIF is the first private health insurance fund to publicly support and rebate cannabis medicines in Australia. So this, I think, really sets the bench high for other funds to consider. But most importantly, it recognises that cannabis is now a mainstream medicine and it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. We also recently launched the Quest initiative with the University of Sydney. Now, Quest aims to be one of the world's largest longitudinal studies investigating the quality of life on patients that are suffering from chronic disease. And this is using LGP cannabis medicines. What is really special about this study is that it's ethics approved, but it connects the patients to doctors and it offers discounted medicines. So this study will be run for a minimum of 2 years and it has the potential to be extended internationally, and that's what's exciting for us because that's what's on the horizon. And currently we have about 800 patients in the study just in the last couple of months. Okay, next slide. This is really important, this one, because we continue to make rounds in our distribution networks in overseas markets to reach that target of commercial sales volumes that I was just speaking of. So remembering that this is the prize for us here. So in Poland, yesterday, we signed an exclusive distribution agreement with Medicinal, which is a subsidiary of the largest operator in Poland and Lithuania. And they're aiming to sell LGP medicines to 20% of the market for our cannabis oils and about 10% of the market for our flower medicines. In France, where LGP was one of only 4 global companies selected as a primary supplier for a French medicinal cannabis trial, and that's for up to 3,000 patients. And we've already sent 7,000 units or bottles of our cannabis medicine to France for that trial. So that's currently the biggest study perhaps happening in Europe, so it's important, and LGP medicine is the most frequently prescribed product at the moment. Now, this whole French medicinal trial is really significant for us because it goes with our first mover advantage and brand equity that we believe is so important for the future. But also, this trial is likely to be the catalyst in changing legislation, and that market could be worth up to 4 billion. Germany, I'll just touch on briefly, but one of our distribution partners, Demican, provided us with firm purchase orders totaling about 5.7 million this calendar year alone. So that's about 47,000 units that we're sending there. So, and this, well, annualized, represented on an annualized run rate is about 10 million per annum, and that's just for the one distributor. This is really meaningful for the company because, one, it represents evidence, I guess, of the success of our strategy for our export markets, but also it reflects the demand that's coming out of Germany and the confidence that our partners overseas have in LGP supply and the quality that we're producing. Okay, we're going to go on to market opportunity and in particular, the next slide's a total addressable market. And so you need to get a really good understanding of the market opportunity to appreciate where LGP is headed. So Canaccord Genuity estimates LGP's existing markets is about the $24 billion mark at maturity. So I guess the point that I'm trying to get across here is that if we can capture market share overseas due to our first mover advantage and that brand equity that I've been speaking about, just like we've done in Australia, then we'll really be delivering on our targets. So this is exciting, and these are the types of announcements that investors should look out for. Now, finally, onto our final slide. We're really fortunate in this business because we solve many ESG challenges through our core business activities. And there are 6 dimensions of impact that we look at, and that we're really strong in several of these, especially the lifetime well-being area. So, and this is what we do. You know, we transform lives. Our core business is improving quality of life. Our operations are in regional Western Australia, so we provide employment and skills training for over 60 people in the southwest community and also in Perth. We proudly employ nearly 60% females, and the age of our employees range from 21 to 73. On the environmental front, we don't use pesticides or other nasties, and we've switched from HPS to LED lighting, so that's important. However, what we need to understand is that we're young, the industry is new, so we're all still learning to optimize our operational efficiencies, but we do aim to continue exploring renewable power, particularly as we expand our operations to cater for the growing demand. So finally, just on the summary points there, why invest in LGP? This is what you need to be left with. We've constantly demonstrated our cost consciousness and run a really lean business model. 2, the market opportunity available to us and our pathway to capture that market share is really real. 3, the confidence in LGP products demonstrated by our partners. 4, capacity to deliver through our vertically integrated business model. And 5, our track record of execution. Whenever we say we're going to do something, we do it. So thank you so much for your time today. There is a next slide there with my email. If you would like to contact me, feel free. I would love to hear from you, and I'd love nothing more than for you to welcome you to the Little Green family. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Fleta. I've got some questions here. Now, you've recently announced some agreements with major distributors in Germany and Poland. How hard is it to get your product into Europe?
Yes, great question. Look, it's so much harder than what we initially thought. Germany alone, I think it took sort of a good 2 years to get in there. And I guess it depends who you're working with in Germany, but and a lot of these countries are the same. France is similar and the same as Poland. But it's not as easy as just saying, look, we've got an MRA, it's EU recognised, we can ship it straight away. It just doesn't happen. They have a quality team that need to sign off, and they need to audit our facilities, where the raw material is coming from. When you have the medicine, whether it's flour or oil, it has to be within 10% of what the label claim is. And that's really difficult when you're talking about a botanical or a plant. So it is difficult, but it's manageable, but it just takes time. So we're very fortunate that we've achieved that in Germany, and we know what's ahead of us in terms of the other markets like Poland.
And you've set up a facility in Western Australia. You've got a lot of cash in the bank. Could you set up a similar facility in Europe?
Look, we're always looking. We're at the point now where, thanks to Demican, our flower capability in our existing facility is pretty much full. So we now need to look to the next stage of our life cycle, which is how do we expand and where do we expand? So we have bought the adjacent properties at our cultivation facility, and we're looking forward to expanding our operations so we can cater for that demand.
And do Australian companies have an advantage from a kind of branding perspective in Europe due to the GMP status?
Oh, look, Australian-made products, they're always well regarded. So I think it's a huge advantage for our country. And the fact that our manufacturing practices are recognised by the EU as being compliant, so that's great. So definitely, I think it's a huge advantage. And the fact that we're one of the few countries in the world that can actually export is also a huge advantage for this industry.
And do you learn a lot when dealing with a country like Germany, and does that help you when dealing with other countries in Europe?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I think if you had to have a scale of where countries sit, Germany is at the highest end. They're so strictly and regulated, more so than Australia. So to us, it was an amazing learning curve, because now that we've done that and got into Germany, I feel that we've got everything that's required to get into any other country. We might be surprised and find when a new jurisdiction opens that they're more strict or stricter, but we'll come across that hurdle once we get to it. But you're always learning in this industry. There's so much ahead of us that we just don't know.
And the product range you've got, do you see competitors coming into this space?
Look, definitely, yes, of course. I think it is still such a popular industry. I do feel strongly that brand equity is really important in those first few companies that get into the market. I feel strongly for that, and that's why we're pushing so hard into international markets, because as those markets open up, we get to have a good foothold in there, and we have a very long-term business strategy. But I think you'll find there'll be some consolidation that will continue. I guess it's starting to happen. It will continue as all the companies kind of come together, so that there are just fewer brands. But we've still got a few years to sort out all the different products that are now available.
Great, thanks, Fleta. That's all we have time for. Always great to have you back, and congratulations on your success over the last 12 months.
Thanks so much, Tim. Great to be back. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
See you later. Next up, we have CAN Group, ASX code CAN, market cap of 110 million, 1 year return of minus 58%. The company's vision is to provide access to a range of medicinal cannabis products for patients in Australia and globally. We have with us Chief Operating Officer Shane Duncan. Shane, over to you. Thanks for your time.
Hi, Tim. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. And looking forward to taking you through what's been our progress over the last 12 months and our plans for the next 12 months. We'll go to the next slide. So I think what's important to realise is that, sometimes companies get into, are looking over the horizon too much and don't get a chance to reflect on what they've achieved over the past 12 months. And one of the really important things that we're able to demonstrate is that we have achieved a tremendous amount and in fact achieved what we set out to do 12 months ago. So I'm currently sitting in our under construction Mildura facility, which we're able to raise some capital and also get some bank finance from the National Australia Bank to get that first stage completed. And I can report that it's a flurry of activity up here with the construction crews making great progress on both the cultivation but also the manufacturing facility, and we're still on track for practical completion at the end of this year. Obviously, a helpful thing that happened in relation to practical completion was the licensing of the facility by the Office of Drug Control. So, there are no delays in terms of commissioning and getting started in the facility as will be fully licensed. Late last year, we were able to get our first order of product, and we talk about what we've been focused on. We've got a number of domestic manufacturer and supply agreements, and also supply agreements into the UK and also Germany. In December last year, we got our first order out to the UK. In January, we announced that we'd made a strategic investment to create a beachhead for us in Europe through with a group called Iuvo Therapeutics. And we shipped to them our first order of over 20,000 bottles of oil in April. So, the translation of that strategic investment and also having that beachhead in Europe was a terrific step forward once we got that first order out the door. In March this year, we started the clinical trial at the Olivia Newton-John Cancer Research Institute around the palliative care and the treatment with medicinal cannabis of patients with advanced breast cancer, and that recruitment and ongoing evaluation of that medication continues at the moment. And probably one of the most significant things we completed over the last 12 months was the acquisition of the SatisFarm business from a Canadian group called Harvest One. And we're now busily working on the integration of that business into our own. And we see just terrific opportunity in that business and also the platform technology that comes with that business. So if we move to the next slide, I think, and Fleeta touched on this in her presentation, is, we are, as we move into looking at financial year 22 and beyond, is the product differentiation and moving beyond commoditization. Cassandra touched on lots of products and prices being driven down. Our focus now, and the SatisFarm acquisition was central to us starting our first registration process, but acquiring or developing patent protected positions on products or technology that we can move forward to registration and have a period of exclusivity to recover the investment from that registration and product development process, is certainly a priority for us. And I know there are a number of companies in the industry who are also, taking the same view into the value of having a differentiated patent protected product range. We go to the next slide. The global medicinal cannabis market is still the significant priority for us. We see the SatisFarm products, and SatisFarm product uses a technology, a microencapsulation technology that improves the bioavailability, so the amount of drug that moves through the gut into the intestine and then gets absorbed and into the bloodstream by about a factor of three to four compared to an oil and some of the other current products that are available on the market as an oral product. So that improved drug delivery, that improved availability of the active ingredient creates a much more predictable drug response. Again, it's a capsule form, so it's a form of product that doctors and patients are very familiar with taking. So we were very excited when this opportunity came along. And currently the SatisFarm product range is only CBD products, but we're moving a manufacturing line into our new facility here, and we'll be manufacturing products, both CBD only products, but also products containing THC towards the end of the year, and looking at product launches of those products into the first half of calendar year 2022. But as Cass alluded to earlier, the Australian market continues to grow momentum. We've got a number of manufacturer and supply agreements in place in Australia now, and moving to a cadence of regular orderings across regular orders from a number of those customers. So, we'll see over the next 12 months is that, we'll work in the background to help those customers achieve their objective and grow their share of the available market. Our investment in Mildura is really around operating at scale and then reducing the operating costs that go along with being a scale producer and scale is everything in any business, and we quickly identified that as being the opportunity for us. The ability to grow flower, process it, manufacture it, and finish products in large volume is really where we're going to drive the operating costs, the cost of producing a packet of medicine to a globally competitive level. And we see that as being terrifically important to not only have a differentiated product that we can push on for registration, which is what the SatisFarm product brings to the company, but then also having a low cost of production to capitalise on that, the margin efficiency, the margin gains we get from doing that. The global opportunities, as a couple of presenters have already mentioned, is terrific. And then having this differentiated registerable product that comes out of a GMP facility is going to make a huge difference in terms of advancing the company and building on the foundations that we've put in place over the last 12 months. On the next slide, I suppose probably there's two parts to this, which is again linked to the SatisFarm acquisition, is that the SatisFarm business is currently established and product on shelf in a range of major retailers in the UK and Ireland. It's between a low dose and a high dose product. We also have a 50 milligram capsule, which is on the SAS program here in Australia, and a number of patients who are taking that on a regular basis. And we're really looking now at how do we exploit this opportunity of the existing legalised low dose CBD market. And we've got a number of conversations around licensing and partnering to take advantage of those markets where we can take forward the existing range and put it into these markets where it's legal for low dose CBD. Concurrently, we're also looking at the opportunity of registering our 50 milligram SatisFarm capsules. You'll hear from Amiria a little later today, and we're working closely with Amiria on a registration program to take that product forward and accelerate that program to capitalise on the opportunity that Cassandra mentioned earlier, which is a large number of patients who'll move out of the doctor-prescribed SAS market and move into the over-the-counter pharmacy-only medicine opportunity. And our timelines are, we're looking at having a product ready to launch towards the back end of next year, and that Amiria partnership is critical for us. So we see that there's significant growth opportunities in parallel with our medical market, with this low dose CBD market in the current legalised markets, but then also over the next 12 months as we move into a registered product. And what's most exciting about this, I think, for our shareholders is that this will be our first registered product, hopefully the first of many registered products that we'll put forward using this SatisFarm platform technology. And that's obviously where the real volume goes. We've got a very unique business model here where, we can monetize and commercialize our businesses out of special access schemes and compassionate use programs around the world in markets where medicinal cannabis is legal. And then we have the opportunity to, on the top of that, to collate the data, put forward dossiers and get products registered around the world. And that's when the real volume starts to flow, and we start to see, medicinal cannabis companies produce sales. And as we've seen with GW Pharma getting Epidiolex registered, is that they're transformational steps for medicinal cannabis companies in terms of their revenues, their profitabilities, and obviously their market caps. Just moving to the next slide, which is really just to summarise where we are at the moment as a business. We've spent and been very committed to proving our capability to supply material that meets the global GMP standards. So, with that, exports into the UK and to Germany, we've dumped all the hurdles that we need to do to get product on market. We continue to do that in Australia under the framework which is standards in good stead of the TGA. We're getting on and commissioning, as we had said we would do, the large-scale production and manufacturing facility here in Mildura, and as I said, on schedule for that by the end of the year. We now that we've forged these export pathways, it's really now a case of customers selling through the stock they've got, and then looking at repeat orders. And we've already got forward forecasts from all our customers out, which see, you know, steady growth over the next few years based on the work that we've been doing over the last 12 months. The registration of the S3 program is that, you know, S3 product is on track, and we look forward to getting that in market as soon as possible. Our investment in R&D and creating you know, unique genetics or higher yielding genetic cultivars is an important part of us, as again improving the profitability, improving the, you know, the efficiency of the facility that we're building here. And we've got an experienced and stable management team who continue to deliver on what we promised. So you know, we look forward. We're certainly very happy with our progress this year, but obviously don't rest on our laurels. We've got a lot of work still to do, and getting this new facility up and running and delivering products by the end of the year is our, you know, is our laser sharp focus at the moment. But thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to keeping you up to date as we move through some of these milestones over the next months. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Shane. We've got quite a few questions, obviously, about the Mildura facility. If we just go back a little bit, you raised 40 million back in July, and then have drawn down a $50 million bank debt facility with NAB. Is that all to facilitate the Mildura facility?
Not all of it. Some of it was to fund working capital and some other projects as well.
Right. And so where are you manufacturing right now? And what's the kind of expected completion date for the Mildura facility?
So we're using a couple of contract manufacturers at the moment to produce products. We are on track to have the facility finished by the end of this year. And first plants coming in at the end of the year, with first crops coming out Q1 next year. And what sort of size and scale has that given you in regards to production? Yeah, currently we can produce about 1.5 tonne of flower a year at the moment. So around 150,000 bottles of oil in round terms. The facility here running at full capacity will be 12,500 kilos, so 12.5 tonne. So, you know, a many magnitude difference in scale of what we can produce here. And we're going to progressively commission that facility. So that capacity will come online as the demand follows, so that, you know, we're able to do it as a staged commissioning to obviously ensure the facility runs as expected, and we don't get any surprises out of the production process. And can you talk a little bit more about your German GMP investment? Is it called IUVO? IUVO, yeah. IUVO, so, there you go. IUVO, a privately held business. They've been working away on flower only up until now. And I think you asked a question earlier about setting up an organisation or an affiliate in Europe. And we had again gone through that process of thinking about whether that was a prudent deployment of capital, given all the things we're trying to do here. And it made sense to us to have an investment and a tighter relationship with a group who were already on the ground, understood the regulatory framework, had already imported products, and were dealing with physicians and pharmacists in the country. So we saw it as being, a relatively low-cost way of having that tighter strategic relationship, and also having that beachhead in Europe that we can then launch off into not only Germany, but all the medical markets that exist in Europe. And just a more technical question here. What is the expected time frame to get product registration for OTC for your S3 capsules? I assume there are clinical trials involved before registration. So before we can do, we're planning a clinical trial at the moment, which we'll get started on soon. That will feed into the broader dossier, and we've got some information that already exists out of previous R&D that's been done with those Satifarm capsules. So the current timeline is we're looking to submit that dossier by the end of the year. It's a 210 working day processing process with the TGA. So 9 to 12 months later, you'll see, if you've ticked all their boxes, you'll see a product approved and on market. And finally, question here: are you getting product consistency in terms of active ingredient? And can that be scaled up with confidence in terms of quality? Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think the significant part of the investment in a new facility is really how we control the environment. So one of the things that we found attractive about being in Mildura is a low level of humidity, a bit more sunlight throughout the day, helps in terms of energy utilisation, but also in terms of the external environment for the glasshouse. But the investment that we're making in air handling and filtration and lighting within the facility really does create a very controlled, protected cropping environment for the flower, which we think significantly de-risks. And we've taken this from, our design is very similar to the Aurora projects that have been commissioned, particularly the Sky facility in Edmonton. And we've seen that they've had that reproducibility of their raw material product, which has, allowed them to, it's minimised the vagaries or the variances that you see from crop to crop and batch to batch. So we think all of that investment in the technology creates de-risks the product that we produce, which then is what the regulators are looking for. They are looking for consistency of profile, consistency of the quality of the product, that the raw material that leaves the production facility.
Great, Shane. That's all we have time for. Thanks for the introduction to the company, and have a nice weekend.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, next up we have Althea Group, ASX code AGH, market cap of $87 million, a one-year return of -5%. The company is an Australian licensed producer, supplier and exporter of pharmaceutical-grade medicinal cannabis. We have with us the Chief Financial Officer, Robert Messner. Robert, thanks for your time. Over to you.
Great, thank you very much for that. So obviously my name is Robert Messner and I'm representing Althea here today. So if we just jump onto the next slide. Yeah, so Althea, like a few others, does have the vertical integration, and that goes all the way from product research and development, which is obviously critical in this area, to also having processing and manufacturing capabilities, and then also having the market access, which is the sales and marketing, which is a real critical part to how these products are going to get into market and how we educate sort of the doctors and patients on just how to access the medicine and also what the medicine can do for them. We also have a global business, and that's global in two ways. And we also have the reach from the distribution standpoint, and like a few of the other companies here today, we do have our products in many markets at the minute, but we also have diversification in not only being medicinal and medical, we also have a recreational side to our business. So if we just jump into the next slide there. Yeah, so this is a good overview of who we are as a company. And I'll start with the medical side. So we have our own product and under our own brand, which is Althea. So currently, to date, we've have more than 17,000 patients, and we'd be one of the market leaders in the Australian market with around 30 or over 30% of the market share. Been selling since middle of 2018 and really seen some really strong growth from then till now. And obviously have expanded that brand, the Althea brand, as we go. We have kept that brand in all markets that we've moved into. The way that we have been able to sort of achieve the results to date is through the education of doctors, of everyday doctors. And it's your GP and my GP. And that's how we think the best path for cannabis moving forward in Australia and around the world. So how we've been able to do that is we created what is called Althea Concierge, which is a unique online portal where doctors can get the education they need on how to prescribe the products, what products are best for what conditions. It also helps them track patients' pain or quality of life over a period of time, just so that they can see the impact that it's having on their patients. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we do help with the titration because it is difficult. This is a new area for some doctors, and especially with the general GPs, they do find it difficult. And what we're trying to do is simplify how that information is given to them, and it's all in one spot. It also helps with the SASB applications through the portal. So it's a bit of a one-stop shop, and the feedback we get from doctors is it's really helpful to have all that information in one place, and it allows them to just be able to access it easily and efficiently. We also have another portal for doctors to just get general education on cannabis, and that's CPD points for them. But again, we just feel like as an industry, everyone needs to take their part and educate the doctors in how these products are going to help help patients, because that's obviously why we're all here. It is the only software as a medical device by a medicinal cannabis company that's licensed by the Office of Drug Control, and that's a really critical thing that we've been able to do. We really feel like it does help, and as I said, the doctors really feel that is a big benefit to them. We do operate clinics in the UK only at this point in time via telehealth, so it's quite a lean model. We really feel that clinics are an amazing way to start a market, because in the early stages, doctors are finding it difficult and they do need that education before they're obviously willing to prescribe. So by having access clinics, and it's called My Access Clinics in the UK, it allows for us to really, supercharge that sort of market. They've had 700 patients in treatment, and we do have doctors that cover all the different conditions: chronic pain, anxiety, sleep disorders, etc. So that sort of covers us off as a medical company, and I'll get into sort of the global part of that in a minute. But the other part of our business, which is unique to us as an Australian listed company, is our exposure to recreational cannabis. Currently in Canada at the minute, because that's the biggest recreational market. But this is an area that we're really excited about. About 18 months ago, we acquired a company called Peak Processing Solutions, which is one of the leading and largest recreational cannabis product manufacturers in Canada. And they do a range of products, canned beverages, topicals, edibles, and things like that. And this is a really large growing area in the Canadian recreational space. We do own it 100%, and it was founded by 4 people who left one of now the largest cannabis company in the world. So we also, not only in purchasing this company and purchasing everything that they have in Canada, we also were able to onboard 25 to 30 years cannabis experience to our company, which again, being an Australian cannabis company, to have that sort of experience through one transaction is amazing. And they've helped us not only in the recreational side, but in the medicinal side as well, which has been a great advantage to us. The estimates for the recreational side is it's probably the multitude or the multiplier of about 4 or 5 times what any medical business is or medical sort of opportunity is. So we're really bullish on this one because it is an area that's growing, and their sales in Canada for these sort of canned beverages and topicals products is growing quite rapidly. And even through the COVID period, they were considered essential, so they haven't seen really any drop off, and more products are coming to market. And obviously, Peak are able to help these brands bring their products to market, in an efficient way, and we're really seeing some good results out of that. So that's currently in Canada. There are obviously a few countries who are looking at legalizing the recreational business. I mean, the US being the most obvious. Mexico is another one that started talking about it. But we really feel that long term, recreation cannabis will follow medicinal cannabis. So, like places like Canada, where they started with the medical side, and then in 5-6 years after that, they have been recreational, and we really see that's how the word will flow. So Peak gives us obviously a great business in Canada as it stands right now, but it also gives us that experience that we'll gain and have gained over the last 18 months, and we'll gain in the future to be able to roll that out into other countries, whether that be the US, Australia, Mexico, as the world sort of opens up for recreational cannabis. So if we just jump into the next slide, yeah. So again, like, why Arthea? I mean, we have a strong financial performance to date. We've been, and we'll get to that in a minute, we've been around for a while. We've been able to deliver on consistent month-on-month, quarter-on-quarter growth. And we obviously have now, with moving across Europe and into other markets, we now have a really good platform to grow and continue to grow. Again, we have an amazing management team, not only supplemented by the Peak team, which have a huge amount of cannabis experience, but we've had the same management team, the same group since we IPO'd in late 2018. So we just jump into the next one. Yeah, this is just a demonstration of, I suppose, where we currently are and the opportunity, like a few people have already spoken about today. But it just says that, when we IPO'd back in September of 18, we were just in Australia. And obviously, we've been able to now deliver over the last little while on the expansion of the Arthea brand across the world. And obviously, this is not the end of it. Obviously, we've got some more in the pipeline, and we'll continue to expand, in the coming months and years. If we just keep heading on to the next slide. Yeah, this is another just demonstration of how, since we, I suppose, first started selling, which was in May 2018, again, it's just the consistency of Arthea being able to deliver on not only what we say, but also keeping the business moving forward. We started in Australia. Australia has been an amazing market for us, continues to be an amazing market for us, but just for the sheer size, there are 66 million people in the UK, there's 80 odd million people in Germany, France, etc. So, long-term Australia won't be the biggest part of our business. And that's key. And as the other companies have said before, it's got to keep the wheels moving. And we just feel like we've been able to deliver consistently on moving forward in the world and progressing the Althea business. Next slide, please. Yeah, so Europe is a huge expansion area for us at the minute. Our CEO, Josh Fegan, actually relocated to London in the middle of a lockdown, which was pretty impressive on his behalf. But so he's now located out of London, and he's there to really push the Althea business forward in Europe. And that's through our exposure to the German market through a distributor called Nimbus, of where we've got a joint venture with them. Obviously, we're involved in the French trial as well. And then obviously that's not the end. On the side there, it sort of shows you what countries have legalized cannabis, and there's still a lot of grey area in there for a lot of countries still to legalize. So we just really feel like Europe is the next wave for cannabis, and obviously we want to be front and center there. So hence our CEO being there ready to help through that process. If you can just jump into the next slide, please. Yeah, so to touch more on the financial side of the business, as you can see there on the left, so this is from our half-year results. We've been able to grow the business consistently over the last few halves there. And as you can see in the half 21, we really start to see our international businesses kick into that revenue. And we expect that to grow. And as I said before, we expect that those businesses will far outweigh our Australian business in the long term. And especially the Canadian revenue there from our recreational business, we expect that to be really significant in the not too distant future. Again, we've been able to deliver this, consistent growth over, the last couple of years, and we're very much looking forward to delivering on that as it grows, with the international part of the business being by far the biggest for us moving forward. And just on to the next slide. Yeah, this just sort of is a bit of a snapshot of who the shareholders are. And like Peter was saying, that obviously Joshua Fegan is our largest shareholder, so he has invested personally into this, and he keeps it running. We also got a really good support from the IPO onwards, and continue to have that support as we move on. That's all for me. So thank you very much for the time.
Thanks, Robert. Bang on time. A couple of questions here, just specifically in regards to the medication. So, do you see cannabis-derived medication replacing other prescribed medication for pain, for chronic pain?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of evidence about, and a lot of discussion, about the pain industry and I suppose what they've been through with some of the current medications. So we do see that pain is our biggest indication that we've been treating with our medicine. So we do see it as being a replacement for a lot of the current pain medication out there.
And when I was doing a little bit of research on this sector, I was surprised at how big the recreational market is. So when you talk cannabis, it appears to be about 67% of the total market. Can you talk a little bit more about this Canadian acquisition and the potential there? Like, where is revenue now, and how big is that market, particularly in the States and Canada, right?
Yeah, so currently the business in Canada is localized to Canada because of the way that the US hasn't really federally legalized it yet, although with Biden at the minute, that's what they're talking about. So it's a Canadian business, but the Canadian recreational business is probably one of the most developed in the world. And they went through a few stages, but they're now into the stage where it is canned beverages, edibles, topicals, and those sort of products. And they're really the ones gaining traction. They do find that they're taking a little bit of market share from alcohol companies, and that's why a lot of alcohol companies are starting to invest in cannabis. So the demand there is really strong. And as I said, the estimates, they vary depending on sort of what publication you read, but it's about 4 to 5 times any medical market is what the recreational market or addressable market is in any given country.
And you can't access those states in America where it is legalized at the moment?
No, because it's federally not legalized, you can't take anything over a border. So the US is a really complicated market at the minute, but the facility that we have is actually about 30 minutes from Detroit. So we're well positioned that, you know, with the experience too, that if the US market ever opened up, would be in a good position to start there as well.
And for that recreational product, what sort of regulatory hurdles does that have to get through before that is allowed to go to market?
Yeah, it's considered more like a food product because they are beverages. There's a lot of companies that we've signed deals with which are already in the beverage or alcohol space. So there's still the regulation around cannabis, and it's the same for the medical side that used for the recreational side. So all the building and the facility that we have there is all regulated by the same group. So from that standpoint, you still obviously have to be 100% on that. But the products are very much, food-based and the same tests that you need for all cannabis products are there. So it's reasonably well regulated, like the medicinal and medical side.
And I mean, effectively, you're running a global business here in Europe and Canada and manufacturing from Australia. How do you manage this from a cash flow perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's we've taken a slow and steady approach. We haven't gone everywhere. We do have an in-field sales team in Australia and the UK, so we think they're probably the biggest markets for us. We've done a joint venture in Germany, so that's a capital light way of doing it. France, again, a distributor, and a few other markets that we're going into. We just do it in a cost-effective way, so we won't be everywhere in 100%. But we'll just pick and choose the markets that have the most upside for us and go that way.
And is the plan in the future to actually manufacture offshore?
Yeah, so we currently do. So our facility in Canada can manufacture for us, and they do, and that's a really cost-effective way for us. We also have some products manufactured here locally as well. But yes, so Canada can do it right now. So we're already able to do that.
Great, Robert. That's all we have time for. Hope you have a great weekend, and love to get you back on board again.
Great. Thanks again.
Thanks for your time. Next up, we have Amiria, ASX code EMD, market cap of $46 million. Company's had a one-year return of up 220%. The company's developing technology-powered health services that elevate clinical care and deliver deeper clinical insights. We have with us the Managing Director, Dr. Michael Winlow. Michael, thanks for your time. Over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. And thanks to the previous presenters for some great talks and the online participants for sticking around. I think you'll like Amiria's unique approach to the medicinal cannabis opportunity globally, and look forward to sharing that with you. If you could go to the next slide, skip a couple if you don't mind. Great. So Amiria's goal is to develop registered treatments. These are formally approved medications with major global regulators. We achieve that by the clinical evidence that we gather treating patients with unmet needs across our clinical network. And I'll explain how that is all put together shortly. We've had a great return over the last 12 months, some good investor support behind our drug development programs, which we've announced. We recently raised $5 million last month. We're in a strong cash position to get that work done. If you go to the next slide, please. Great. So we've got some really unique assets here. We have a network of specialist medical centres around Australia that treat patients with a diverse range of unmet needs. Most of those patients are referred to us because they're not getting response from standard treatment. Most of those referrals come from their specialist physician, and we have a really good rapport with the medical community in that regard. We have seen over 4,000 patients, and each of those patients is now part of our ongoing longitudinal registry, which is our other core asset and point of difference. We've invested heavily in the data infrastructure that supports our clinical service, and that has allowed us to build an incredible real-world data set about how these treatments work best and for whom. And we use those insights to provide individualized care back to our patients, and it also helps us launch very focused drug development programs, for specific drug dose indications. And you can see the ones that are in progress right now. EMD003 focused on psychological distress. That is aimed to be a cannabinoid over-the-counter medicine under the Schedule 3 program here in Australia, working on that with partner Can Group. We have EMD004 in development as well for symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome. And we also have a partnership with Mind Medicine Australia working on MDMA for post-traumatic stress disorder, which I'm happy to speak about as well. And I'd say one key thing about, taking a leadership position in registered drug treatments, one really needs intellectual property around ideally the dose form, and secondly, the method of use for these treatments, which are essentially generic medications applied to new problem spaces. If we can go to the next slide, please. Here's the brains of our operation, which is the robust clinical data we've gathered. I want to highlight a couple of things here. One is the diversity of the patients that we see at Emeria and at our Emerald clinics. Children as young as 2, patients as old as 96. The second thing is the diversity of experience we have with the products that we prescribe. Anywhere between 0 to 600 milligrams of CBD a day, anywhere between 0 and 200 milligrams of THC. So we have a really good read and grasp on how these treatments work, what the side effect profiles are like, what are the clinical outcomes that patients can experience. And it's those insights which enable us to give good care to our patients, but also supports our strategic drug development work. We could go to the next slide, please. There was a question asked earlier in the day about what patients receive medicinal cannabis. Here is a snapshot of our patient population. A majority come in for complex chronic pain, but you can see we have this very long tail of patients with primary mental health concerns, cancer-related symptom treatment, neurological disorders, and a long list of other indications as well. So really the patients receiving medicinal cannabis or seeking help for their condition really represents a really diverse, rich group. Each of these unmet needs becomes potentially an indication for a new registered drug treatment. We can go to the next slide. Terrific. And so I want to kind of emphasize here what advantages we have by running our own clinical service. Because of our patients and their complex clinical conditions, at some extremes, the clinical service is almost as important in the care and delivery as the drug treatment alone. And that's certainly true when we talk about some of the frontier areas like psychedelic assisted therapy for things like post-traumatic stress disorder. The clinical service and how you wrap around the care team around that treatment is almost just as important as the drug therapy. On the other extreme, it is possible to take drug treatments that could be relevant for a much larger patient population. And if you take those treatments through formal registration, they can become over-the-counter or prescription medicines for a much, much larger population. And I think that really opens the real market for these treatments. So right now you can see we have here laid out on this diagram both programs at the over-the-counter side for EMD003 and of course some of the more complex spaces like MDMA for PTSD. If we can go to the next slide, please. Here's our pipeline and a little bit about the progress of these different treatment programs and indications. A couple are well underway. EMD003 about to commence pivotal studies, EMD004 finalizing dose forms there, and they will enter pivotal studies also. But as you can see, a very long list of potential indications that we can explore. Each represent global market opportunities for us. Next slide, please. And the next one. Now, why are we so committed to registration? We heard from Cassandra earlier today about there are now 190, I have to update this slide, different medical products available in Australia, but really only one with formal registration and PBS coverage. And that's GW Pharma's Epidiolex. If we go to the next slide, please. Just look at the prescription volumes. If we take the estimate that roughly there are 8,000 to 10,000 SASB prescriptions per month in Australia for medicinal cannabis, perhaps that totals to maybe 100,000. Let's say it's 200,000 medicinal cannabis prescriptions over a year. We would say that represented terrific growth. But just look at the number of antidepressants prescribed annually in Australia, 29 million, or in the UK, nearly 70 million prescriptions per year. We also heard some excitement around the growth of authorized prescribers, nearly 400 authorized prescribers in Australia. There are 42,000 prescribing general practitioners in Australia. So to really reach the true potential of this market, if we are truly committed to producing medicines to reach patients, then truly the considerate thing to do is to take those treatments through the registration pathway. And that's what we're committed to doing. If we can go to the next slide, please. It makes commercial sense to do the registration work as well. GW Pharma was recently acquired by Jazz Pharmaceuticals for $7 billion. one of the chief medical officers and head of global R&D, Karen Smith, is now part of our strategic advisory, helping us think through the proper pharmaceutical pathways to take our cannabis products through the registration work and to create that value. We can go to the next slide, please, and the one after this. Great. So a couple of things that motivate us. We know we're making a difference to patients' lives. We have lots of case studies like Bob, where we see a gentleman who had chronic pain for a long period of time, was heavily medicated on a range of different treatments, including high dose opioids, but really had poor quality of life. At about 6 months of care with us, after an individualized treatment program, he settled on a treatment that worked for him. It was very effective. He became off all his pain medications, including all of his opioids, but we can also see great improvements in his quality of life. And it's stories like Bob's which motivate us to try and find how can we make a difference to other people like Bob who are out there who can't reach our clinics. If we go to the next slide, please. And we know that Bob is not just a one-off case. We recently completed a really fascinating research project with IQVIA, who are a major global CRO, a clinical research organization. Their market cap is around $44 billion. They help the world's largest pharmaceutical companies get registered treatments. IQVIA also have access to some really interesting real-world data, particularly in Australia. And we were able to look at the dispensing prescription activity of patients that come to see treatment at Ameria. And then we could look back 12 months before those patients arrived at our clinics and have a look at their opioid consumption. And as you can see in this chart, to the left of the yellow line was the average monthly opioid use for a group of patients stratified by dependency on opioids. And as you can see to the right, after treatment with us, a significant reduction in their opioid consumption. Now, that's not just our clinics or our nurses telling you that that's what we're seeing. We're actually seeing this validated in the real world prescription behaviors of these patients. And now we're able to ask a whole heap of other really interesting questions. How can we identify these patients? Can we develop an indication? How can we come up with a custom dose form to treat these people and get that treatment registered globally? We can go to the next slide, please, and the one after this. So right now, one of our key leading programs is EMD003. We bring a lot of our experience and our prior investment to this program, and it's one of the reasons we have confidence we'll be one of the first across the line. We have real-world data on the dose form. We have IP around the method of use. We have developed protocols and a clear regulatory strategy in place to deliver on the S3 program. And we have a unique dose form with partner Can Group as well, which has already completed some of the preliminary clinical work required to get this drug registered. So once we have our pivotal studies underway and completed, we think we can be one of the first to get a Schedule 3 registration and really just prove our method and our model, and then do that again for other indications and other dose forms, and then take those treatments to the bigger markets globally. We can go to the next slide, please. A little bit what looks ahead, particularly for EMD003. We're on the precipice of commencing our trials. Those trials should last a few months. We'll get those completed, and then the dossier can be prepared. But also wanted to point out some of the other activities running in parallel here, particularly our commitment and investment into the psychedelic assisted therapy space for patients with severe PTSD, also some of the registration activities underway for EMD4, and to watch this space for announcements around our global program. We can go to the next slide, and the one after that. I think I'm done. Thanks, Tim. I'll take your questions.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. We actually had Mind Medicine Australia on some time back, and we had a webinar on the psychedelic industry in Canada in particular, and they run clinics with patients who are traumatized and obviously use MDMA to help that trauma. Yes. Why did you go down this clinical path in terms of having clinics? I mean, it seems like a very powerful way for people looking for treatment to come to you. Why did you adopt that model?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. It has been a significant and substantial investment for us to establish these clinics. We don't run them for profit. We run them in order to get the very best clinical outcome and also the very best data from our patients and evidence. And so that speaks to why we did this. It was about getting clear and high quality clinical evidence that can inform how these treatments can be best used and ultimately can inform how to register these treatments. we saw that the growth in the special access scheme was just a short-term solution to what is a long-term problem. If these are truly going to become legitimate mainstream medicines, then they need to be accompanied with robust clinical evidence. And there just wasn't that evidence around. And people weren't investing in traditional trials to get that evidence. So it made sense to set up evidence-generating clinics. And that's what we did.
And sorry, just from my understanding, is that part of the future where a consumer, for want of a better word, a patient comes to you has been recommended or prescribed by their doctor to come to you for further treatments?
That's right. Our model usually works that patients are referred to us when nothing else is working. We then do an evaluation, check that they're suitable for medicinal cannabis, put them in a program that can work for them. Our long-term goal, though, is to take those insights, develop treatments that can work for patients like them, and have those become mainstream options for regular doctors, and therefore reach a much larger patient population and a much larger commercial market too. And then our clinics will run as the place of last resort for the heart sink patients, so we can tackle the next unmet need with the next treatment option.
And just looking through your shareholder base, the Washer family, who I believe is also your chairman, they own 33% of the company. Can you tell us a little bit about their involvement and background?
Sure, yeah. Stuart's one of the founders. Stuart Washer is also involved heavily in a number of biotech companies. Sonata, involved in stem cells, Authorized regenerative medicine, has a lot of really great experience taking drugs through the FDA process and in biotech. He's one of the early founders of Myria, originally Emerald Clinics. He's got a strong holding and he's holding on tight.
And just a question here, how do you manage kind of the complex legal liability issues? You know, all treatments have a range of real life outcomes and possibly unexpected reactions. How do you manage that?
That's a great question. We pay very close attention to adverse events. In fact, adverse events are typically underreported for all prescription medicines. So we carefully check in with every patient. We titrate doses to watch for adverse events. And it's one of the things we track. We use a number of clinical trial assessments or clinical trial grade assessments to get a read on where those adverse events are happening as well. So it's one of the aspects of this treatment which we characterize very deeply. We think that's incredibly important, not just for patient care, but also for generating evidence that a regulator will accept. Because as you would know, safety is one of the critical dimensions. Efficacy, does this work, being the second, and then quality of the product being really the third consideration that regulators have.
Great, Michael. That's all we have time for. Really appreciate your time today. We look forward to catching up again. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for sticking around.
Okay, that's all we have time for this week. Next week, we are exclusively talking resources with a keynote presentation from Perennial Value. See you then.